88 questions I pulled from the College Board site that were not the protected ones. So 88 things from chapters 1 through 5. In order to get 100%, you need to get half of those correct. Half on a APES exam is passing, and you need to start feeling that sensation of not feeling like you did well, but then you did just fine. So AP tests are meant to make a curve and to really find out what you know. So the test that you will be taking from me during finals week is going to be written by the College Board. So you can get a taste for what those kind of questions are going to be like. Then we're going to do Pear Deck for a little bit. First, we're going to do a video to help you with the Pear Deck, specifically on adaptations, which is why I want you to use whiteboards. Correct, Enzo. So basically, if you get anything above a 44, then I put in 100% for that last test grade, which will be out of 44. So it'll be equivalent to about how many test points we're doing on a regular chapter test. It's just going to give you a chance to start feeling what AP tests are like and the level of questions, the type of questions. All right. And then we'll talk about the speciation web work. I tried to find something a little more interactive. Specifically, I wanted something on allopatric versus sympatric speciation. And I found something that was made recently, because you'll see it's referencing at home during remote learning. I really like the second link on this worksheet that I'll talk about when we get to that part. And then on your on-demand day was to look at that as well. So if you didn't, one of the things I talked about was to time yourself to let me know if it's taking longer than 30 minutes and do more Pear Deck practice. And an Edpuzzle on renewable energy, because your your FRQ this week has nothing to do with this chapter's content. It has over 5 points that are just based on math. So it's another question number 2 math practice. If you wanted to have an advantage with the content part, that's why it says to watch something on renewable energy. All right. Let's see. Don't think I've had enough coffee. Feel a little slow this morning. Let's do this. Let's go to week at a glance. The right week, yeah. So tomorrow you have your FRQ. It's hyperlink there, 22 minutes, time yourself. Question number 2 is always a math question. And then your keys link there. It says look ahead, chapter 5 next week. So we are going, I know it says Wednesday, but that's not true because we have a weird schedule next week. No Monday. So ignore that, but it will be posted on Launchpad, but it will not be Wednesday. It might be, it depends upon which class you have me. So day 2, working towards sustainability. You have like a little separate section in chapter 5 on oceans. And we do a separate lab about fishing and looking at sustainable yields. So this is a good reading for you to do. And I also put some Edpuzzles about that. So if you see a bunch of Edpuzzle choices about sustainability, that's what that's about. And then College Board daily video 5.8 is available. And then you have a competition that we're gonna do. So have a piece of paper or something ready. You'll be in breakout rooms doing a competition to review, and then composting time. And then more Pear Deck. Oh, and then add aquatic biomes. So I wanna talk about that. So if you go to your classwork tab, because there's been a lot of questions from 1st and 3rd. Here we go, book creator. I reposted the book creator example because it has the instructions for the title page, the terrestrial biomes. The aquatic biomes is a little bit separate in terms of you're just doing 1 slide per biome from those pages in your book. I didn't feel like we did enough to understand the different biomes. let me get to that because there's a separate explanation. That was just some people didn't have the original book, and so I reposted it. That's your daily attendance. You guys know about that. This is your extra credit opportunities. So the Kahoots and the quiz is. This is the book creator part. So a lot of you guys, not a lot, a few of you consistently ask me things that are in this section that explains the assignment. So it's important to go sometimes to this view assignment and go to instructions, because I try to put the instructions on there. And yes, you are still just copying and pasting. So you're just making a study card per biome. So I think I got this right, but I might have to double check. But it's about page 133 to 138. It is module 13. And I think I might have gotten this off. I think there's only 8 aquatic biomes, not 10 there. You're just putting the title. You're going to go find an image, pick study images, like ones that label zones and things like that. So something that's going to be useful for you to reference and answer questions from and to study from. So maybe something that has things like benthic zones and littoral zones and mimetic zones. All those things are labeled on the image for whatever aquatic system you are doing. So title of what the aquatic biome is, and you'll see them. They're just the subheadings on these pages of your book. An image, so a study image, and that you're copying and pasting, and then a plant and an animal adaptation of something in that aquatic zone. And then any key terms you see represented in bold in that section, if you don't know them. Okay, so again, you do not need to be wasting time on terms or things that you already know. But if there is a term in that section and you've not heard of it and you don't know it, that is when you need to copy and paste and add it. Any other questions about the aquatic biomes? Because I realized that we kind of skipped over that and never did that section, and I want to make sure.
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So in the textbook, it puts streams and rivers together. So would the information be the same even though we have 2 separate pages?
I would just put those on one page.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I think I got the 8 versus 10. I'm not sure. I think in my teacher book, it said on the side 10. And then if you actually count your guys' subheadings, I think there's 8. So go with the 8 aquatic biomes. All right, we're going to start, like I said, with whiteboards. So if you guys could get to your stream page, click on this whiteboard link so that you show up on my, oh, you probably are already, okay. So I see Isla, Heather, Jason, Nan, Ryan, and Vivian already there. Well done. And we're going to watch one of the College Board videos. I'm going to keep going back, especially second semester, and trying to find ones that apply directly to whatever we're covering in class, just to remind you of this resource. They do a really great job of giving all the hints that you need and practice that you need to earn points. So the more specifically what wording they're looking for. So we're going to watch one of those, and I'm going to pause it and ask you questions during it. And I'm going to try to explain what I see students do when I score those and why they lose points. Because unfortunately, it isn't because you don't know the topic. It's because you don't answer the prompt completely. So has everyone got whiteboards ready to go? Nope. I see Edith, Isla, Heather, Jason, Jesse, Laura, Leo, Lorelei, Luca, Luke, Maddie, Nan, Ryan, Shivan, Vincent, and Vivian are on the whiteboards. So all you are doing right now is listening to the video, and then I will be pausing it and asking you questions just to see how we're doing and how we're interpreting it, and to give you, again, some exposure to Mrs. Fassler. She is one of, I think, 4 teachers that they're using in these daily videos. All right, I'm going to make it bigger. And so that's fine. Yeah. Yeah, if you can't get the whiteboard to work, then just direct message me your answers. I'm missing several of you, so somehow I'm gonna have to take attendance too. Okay, let's get started. Let me know if you're not ready. I could see my screen. Okay, let's get started.
Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time on AP Daily.
Oh, sorry. I got started again because I was watching it again.
Hi, Ms. Fassler back here again to start topic 2.6, one of my favorite topics in Unit 2, adaptations. Let's see what we're going to learn today. The essential knowledge statement, that concrete piece of information that we're going to work with, is that organisms adapt to their environment over time, both in short and long-term scales via incremental or small changes at the genetic level. In order to show that we understand that, our learning objective is to be able to describe how organisms adapt to their environment. That's kind of a mouthful, so we're going to revisit that essential knowledge statement at the end. Make sure you have a really good handle on it. We're going to use a calculator a little bit later today, so if you want to pause and grab one now, go ahead and get that, and I'll see you in a second.
I don't think you really need it. You can probably do it in your head.
Let's take a look at an example to get started about how organisms adapt to their environment. Sometimes that adaptation is an outward change in appearance. You probably remember hearing about the peppered moth story in an earlier science class. That's where we had these moths that they were light colored, but they had little dark specks peppered across their wings. And they were really well adapted to the environment that they lived in, which was light colored trees. Well,
what changed? What made the color of the trees change before she reminds you of it? Why did the color of the trees change? Who remembers this from middle school or their reading? Write it on your whiteboard if you know. Good, Luke, that is correct. Anybody else? Or she tells us. Yes, Laura. Oh, and that's the other thing. A lot of you, one of the words that students love to use that will give you 0 points, but you just have to make a little change, is the word pollution. 40% of your test is on pollution and human impacts. So you have to say something like, what kind of pollution? So just be really careful and really specific. All right, so soot is correct.
There was a disruption to the ecosystem. We started burning coal that emitted soot and darkened the trees. And now the mostly dark colored peppered moths were better adapted to the environment that they lived in. Another example of an adaptation is more of something happening at the biochemical level. Maybe a change in an amino acid that makes that protein kind of fold just a little bit differently. And a really good example of that is pesticide resistance. Just random mutations have given some insects a selective advantage. We changed the environment. We introduced pesticides like DDT, and they had an advantage that made that pesticide not kill them. Those individuals with the pest resistant, with that gene that allowed them to survive, were able to reproduce and pass on that advantageous trait.
Right, and that's really specific wording, and this is where I want to check on your whiteboards, because this particular concept is huge, and I get kind of riled up about it when it comes to how you take your antibiotics and how often you're using 99.99% hand sanitizer, which I know our entire world is using a ton of. Because if there was no variation, there was no gene in this case for a pesticide resistance, or there was no gene in the bacteria on your hands that allowed them to be resistant to hand sanitizer, what would happen after you apply that hand sanitizer or that pesticide or that insecticide? What's going to happen if there is no mutation and no variation in the existing population that's living on your hands or living in your body or living on the crop? What will happen when we spray or we dose ourselves? What do you guys think? What's going to happen? Yes, there we go. See a couple of you. Joshua, yes. Laura, yes. Jason, good. Good. Yeah, they would die. Okay, so if the variation doesn't already exist, then that spray is going to wipe out and kill everyone just like it's supposed to. The problem is with sexual reproduction and mutations that occur, especially bacteria who can reproduce every 20 minutes, right, there's a lot of variation. So the likelihood that a few of them might have the variation that makes them resistant exists. And if you follow that logic, and what she's going to talk about is the next generation shows us evolution. So the offspring that survive is where we see evolution. It is not a change that's happening because we sprayed them with pesticide. It's happening because of the next generation getting to pass on their genes. So that's kind of some wording that I'm pretty picky about so that you understand that we're not seeing changes because we treated them in some way and they get to magically change their genetics. Although there are changes that happen to your genetics by your diet and things that you do to yourself. In this case, we're just talking about what happens between one generation and another.
Eventually, we ended up with an entire population that was resistant to the pesticide. We can spray pesticide on that crop all day long, and it's not going to kill them because the entire population has become resistant. You'll have a chance to dig into that process in more detail when you look at the pesticide treadmill in another unit. Let's practice an example. So we said that first essential knowledge statement, that adaptation happens through these small incremental changes in genetic material, that's a little bit hard to conceptualize. So let's do a little bit of a model and work with some data in order to illustrate that. We're going to look at a population of woolly worms. They consist of worms whose habitat is brightly colored pink flowers. And there are different colors or variants within their population. There are pink, green, brown, and turquoise worms. The question we want to ask is, how does allele frequency change through successive generations?
All right, so she just used a term, another really important term, but it isn't defined, which is what is an allele? So right on your whiteboard, if you can tell me what is an allele, A-L-L-E-L-E, what is an allele? Why do we care about alleles? And if you don't know, just put a big question mark. Otherwise, make a guess. What's an allele? Even within the context of what she started to say, what do you think an allele is? Good, Leo. John, sort of. In some ways, yes, that's how they come about. Okay. So before we move on, good, a type of gene. So they are a form of a gene. So for example, if I was talking about the gene for eye color, right on your whiteboards, what would the alleles be for eye color? If it's a form of a gene, it's a form of eye color, what are different forms of that same gene that tell us eye color information? What could they be? My hint is my mother has blue eyes, so I know I carry at least two different alleles for eye color, brown and blue. What are some other alleles that would exist? Good. Isla says hazel, green. Yes. Okay, so you get chromosomes, right? So some of you were writing on your whiteboard about chromosomes. We get chromosomes, half of them from mom, half of them from dad. But what alleles are on there, right? We don't know. And most of our traits, even eye color, are what are called polygenic, which means multiple genes give you that trait. And so you have different alleles that are being donated. So alleles are just forms of a gene. So in middle school, usually they teach you the really basic ones that only have two choices, like you either have attached earlobes or unattached earlobes. You either have hitchhiker's thumb or you don't have hitchhiker's thumb, right? But a lot of our traits are much more than that. There's more than just two choices. You only get genes from both your parents, but that doesn't mean there aren't many forms of the same gene. So it's just a fancy word for it could be any different form of that same gene that makes a certain trait. So in this case, we're going to be looking at pink, whatever color that is, and turquoise.
And in our model here, each different little color worm represents how that allele is expressed within the population. So at population 0, we have about 10 of each allele represented, pretty even distribution of that allele among the population. After 5 generations, we can see the green, brown, and even the turquoise decrease, but there are more pink alleles represented, and then that becomes a lot more dramatic after 10 generations. So the model helps us visualize what's going on here. Now let's take a look at some data, because remember, our data is to be, our science practice is to be able to draw some conclusions and analyze that data. So I'm going to give you a second to try the calculations. I'll show you one example and then we'll share them all. So the frequency of that allele at each generation is how many of that allele were present relative to all the alleles in the population. And remember, when we began—
Who knows on the whiteboard, what's the term for all the alleles in the entire population? So there's a term given to when we say, okay, we have this amount available. So natural selection, or nature is going to select acting on all of these for the whole population. Who's going to live and who's going to die out of those alleles. What is that whole group called? Genetics called. Anybody know that term? Mine, a good guess. You gave me the word that means what your individual genes are. So genotype is for you individually. What are your genes? So what is both alleles or all the alleles for you as a person? But what is it for a whole population? Good, Jason. That is correct. Good, Addis. Yep. Good. So what she's talking about, right, is the gene pool, that total amount of raw material of DNA that's available for that 40.
And there was equal allele representation of all 4 of those variants. So 10 divided by 40 gives me a frequency of 0.25. I'll let you try a couple of those calculations and then we'll come back and look at them all together. So you probably found that the allele frequency was the same in that first generation as we started. But we could see in our model that over time, the pink allele increased in frequency. The green and brown allele frequency went down quite a bit, not quite as dramatically as the turquoise. And by the end of 10 generations, that pink allele was the most dominant allele within the population. We have demonstrated that incremental changes at the genetic level allow an organism to adapt to its environment. So remember, the simplest part of this data analysis is to just describe what's happening in the data. And we can easily see that there's an increase in the frequency of the pink allele. If I'm describing this relationship on a free response question, I could always express that in the opposite. I could say an increase in the pink or a decrease in the turquoise, the green, and the brown. Let's go to the next level of that science practice. What can you conclude based on these results? Well, there's a number of different ways I could express this. I could say that the pink worms were best adapted to the current environment. The pink worms had a selective advantage, or again, the opposite of that. The turquoise, green, and brown worms were poorly adapted to the environment.
Right. So here's what I see when I grade these for kids across the nation is you forget one part of this. So you forget to say the pink worms were best adapted, or you say something too general like the pink worms changed. Okay. So be careful in your wording and make sure you have a complete thought. So some of you are still doing some of this when we practice our FRQs. You're not giving me complete thoughts. You're giving me bulleted items. The problem with that is you can get in a rush, and you will be because it's a time test. And at least last spring, they made it so it was a huge test. So you didn't have much time to sit there and think about every single question that they threw at you. But you need to think about complete thoughts. And making it very specific, more specific than you feel like you should have to be.
And finally, What would you predict would happen to the allele frequency if there were some type of disruption to the environment? Maybe now the woolly worm's habitat is a dark brown soil.
All right, so let's practice. If the woolly worms are now living in dark brown soil, tell me what's your prediction going to be? What would you say to earn points for a prediction about the future of this population of woolly worms in dark brown soil? So a couple of you that have blank whiteboards, make sure that you are putting things on direct messages instead. Most of you don't have, or most of you are using the whiteboards, but a couple of you have blank whiteboards so far. Or press enter if that's why I can't see you. I know a lot of teachers move away from if, then, because with predictions and move to things like null hypotheses and alternative hypotheses, which is what I use in the aquatic ecology lab at WSU Vancouver. But I like making sure you have something like if, then, because, so that you don't lose any points. You don't forget that reasoning, that because, why do I think that? Because that's where your points come from on your exams.
How would that change? Well, we could see an increase in the brown worms in the population and a decrease in the pink worms because of the change in the allele frequency.
Did you hear that because part? That's the part that students just forget to say. Okay, so we see an increase and decrease in something, and then because a change in, so evolution happens because of changes in allele frequencies from one population to the next population in the next generation. So you have to have that second piece that explains the because.
So hopefully that essential knowledge statement is starting to make a little bit of sense to you. A really key takeaway from this is that in order for a population to adapt to a new environment, to some type of disturbance, that advantageous or beneficial trait has to be present in the population before the environment changes. It just really solidifies what we learned way back at the start of Unit 2, that genetic diversity is so important in a population. So what should we take away? Genetic diversity is the raw material by which organisms adapt to their environment. We don't know what type of disruptions organisms might face a year from now, 1,000 years from now, or 100,000 years from now. Genetic diversity is the result of mutations that occur randomly and give an individual an advantage if the environment changes. And that essential knowledge statement that hopefully you understand. See if you can go out in your own community and find an example of a plant or animal that's really well adapted to the environment it lives in, and that'll help solidify this idea for you.
All right, and I have one because I check on them almost daily. The goldfish in my front pond, I have 5 that are orange, bright orange, that were like this big, and now they're 25 centers. Now my husband calls them $2 fish. But one of them that schools with the other 5 is like an algae color. There's like, you cannot see that thing without a flashlight and knowing it's there. So my prediction is now that the lily pads are all going away, that will be the one survivor when the hawks and other critters noticed and can see those bright orange ones, right? So this principle is everywhere in life. I think this is one of the critical, essential understandings that I really want you to leave the course understanding how it works. All right, we are going to go see what else you know. So if you go back to your stream page, on your stream page is a link to the very last link is going to take you to a live student-driven Pear Deck session. So click on there, log in, and then I will be able to see you show up on my other screen. I will show you that screen instead. And you jump in wherever you need more practice on the Pear Deck. And I will also put it in your try to put it in your chat box. So you could just click on it there too. There, I'm seeing you. I see 4 of you, 8 of you, 9 of you. All right, so just jump into that wherever you need practice. I will be, you can ignore me or you can check out a couple of the ones that I've seen students struggle with. 14, for example, is a tricky one. So I've been looking at your responses on that one to see if you go back and reread the definition of richness versus evenness. And then what you do with where you put that flag or that dot. So that's where I'm going to start today. But if you feel like you have a strong understanding of those two, then go ahead and skip further ahead. If you've never done that one, or you put the red flag in one versus the other, then we need to talk. Ignore my cat. Vets will not see pets, or my vet will not, is booked until April 28th. She's going to be obnoxious until then. So I see a few of you putting that dot over in community 1. The dot is for the greatest evenness. So somebody unmute. What is evenness?
It's kind of the ratio between species in a given area.
Okay, good. So how many of species A versus species B? And if you notice, they all say 25%. So that is completely even. But what about richness? Somebody unmute. What is the difference between that and richness? So we did a lab on this at the very beginning of the year. What's richness? Somebody unmute.
The number of species in a given area, one compared to the other.
Excellent. So you're just counting, right? How many different species we have. So community 1 has how many? How many total species, different species, does community 1 have?
4.
And how many does community 2 have?
Also 4.
Yes. So that was the trick question because I really wanted you to go back and think about the definition. Okay. So your flag could go like in between these, but they are actually equal. Okay. In terms of richness, not in terms of evenness. Okay. I'm gonna find the other one. So I only see 16 of you so far. So I see Adith, Isla, Enzo, Gavin needs to get back online. Heather, Jason, Jesse, John, Luca, Luke, Maya, Mina, Nan, Savannah, Vincent, and Vivian are all on here. I did not say your name. I do not see you on the Pear Deck yet. And I see 2 of you that are still on slide 1. So you need to move off of slide 1 because there's nothing there to be studying or interacting with. Well, I know which one I want to check. I also want to check slide 27. There were some wrong answers yesterday on that one. So one of our targets is to know the difference between artificial and natural selection. And then we already know that last week we were working on how to interpret cladograms and phylogenetic trees. So there's some circling and finding of common ancestors. I know one of these I wrote a horrible question, or horrible part about a common ancestor. There's more than one right answer on slide 50. So you're not showing up if you're not on the right link. So if you are not showing up on my roster, that's because you're on a different Pear Deck than the one we're doing live right now for second period. So you need to be on that particular link because they all look the same. They're all given a different link depending on what date I'm doing them and which class period I'm doing them with. So make sure you have clicked on the link that's in our chat box. I see Adith, Isla, Enzo, Gavin's offline, Heather, Jason, Jesse, John, Laura, Luke, Madison, Maya, Mina, Nan, Savannah, Shivan, Vincent, and Vivian are all on here, and Thomas now. Two students flip over there. Oh, so yeah, I'm hoping it shows this to you too. I always give you guys notes in your slides that come from the textbook. Like I've typed those in so you have access to all of that as well and can practice some of the math. And the one I just clicked on said, two students flip over their desks, look at gum stuck at the bottom of their desk, which has greater species diversity, which has greater richness. If desks clean, use mixture of candy or dried beans. Okay, so that's disgusting. That's like an activity suggestion for you guys to learn about biodiversity. We did our front yards and backyards, but that actually is a thing because at the end of the year when you flip your guys' desk over, it's gross. But there's another way to do a biodiversity study. Okay. So I'm just looking at your answer 20, slide 24. So artificial, the main difference here, right, is we choose. So nature's not choosing, predators are not choosing, climate is not choosing who lives and dies, humans are choosing who lives and dies, right, for specific traits. Good, I see one of you have done slide 26, where you tell me about which species is most closely related to the cheetah. So reading and interpreting charts and diagrams is huge for this year's test. Around 70. Okay, let me look at around 70. 70 is probably about when we get random questions. Oh no, extinctions. 72 is just a study slide. It doesn't even come from your book, but your book doesn't, it just shows you where the extinction events happen. And so I put one in there that's more like a study slide of the name of those extinction events and then what animals or plants went extinct during that time. So this is just a study slide, slide 72. There's some questions about once we get to the last part of your chapter on global mass extinctions. Yeah, and there's all sorts of books you can read right now that are called The Sixth Extinction, and it is humans. Yeah, and the rest of those are just random ones I pulled from all over the place. All right, we are running short of time, and I want to make sure I talk to you about the web worksheet that hopefully you started yesterday, but if not, I'll explain that web work a little bit more and again. So I'm going to end your student paced Pear Deck, and I will have the 20 some of you who are here. If you are not joined us, you and I need to talk at some point to figure out why you're not on there, because you need to be interacting with the information, not just showing up as a black box. All right. So on your stream page, let's get back to the stream page again. I am going to, this is all under your classwork tab as well. I'm going to go to your 2021 speciation mode. And the reason why I picked this particular one, it's going to make a copy for you on the, if you open it up under your assignments, is I wanted something to make you go through allopatric and sympatric speciation. So if you know some Latin and Greek or start to learn your Latin and Greek, it's a lot easier. You don't have to memorize these if you know that sim means same. Patrick is patriotic, or your fatherland, your homeland. So sympatric means they're living in the same area. They're on the same piece of land, but they quit seeing each other as the same species. So something happens, whether they start singing a different song, and if you don't sing the right song, I'm not going to mate with you, or they come out of hibernation like frogs do at different times of the year, so they never see each other anymore. So these are all things that even though you live in the same area, you slowly over time from one generation to another become a whole separate species. Versus allo means other or different, Patrick, means that there's actually in physically separated. So a river, a mountain, kind of the more typical one that you hear about in middle school that leads to speciation. So I want to make sure that you understand both of those. And on your worksheet, there's a link here. And like I said, these are all brand new. So you'll have to time yourself and let me know how far you get in this worksheet after 30 minutes. But I really like this particular link because it's going to go through all these ways that species can become reproductively isolated, which means they quit reproducing with each other. And it gives you actual specific examples, and then talks you through each one of the examples.
Mrs. Roberts, I think your screen
I think I'm accidentally in. Okay, I have two of them going at once. I don't know why. But so you're writing about how did these species get isolated? So what actually happened? And then what changes happened as a result of it. So it's kind of like that woolly worm stuff, but with real species.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes.
Your screen is frozen.
Oh, well, that would not be very helpful. Let me do this. Okay, so I'm on this. Everybody see it now? And I'm on this link. And this is the link that will talk you through all the examples.
Geography in several freshwater lakes, groups.
And then it's going to give you specific
in Arizona, two
species.
Populations of ground squirrels were gradually cut off from in the Hawaiian island.
And so it's just going to go through all these different ways
barrier to reproduction
that species become isolated, okay, besides just geography. All right, and then it's going to give you, yeah.
So I was doing it yesterday, and on some of the slides, it's not 100% clear what the reproductive barrier is. The only hint is like what they put at the beginning, like behavior or geography. So is it okay if we just put that one word there if it doesn't?
Yeah,
make
it's
sense?
really looking if you can recognize temporal, which is timing. So that's like coming out of hibernation at different times. Behavioral, these are the big categories, and physical. So it's really wanting you to identify these right here. Reproductive, is it shape, body parts? When you get into AP bio, you're going to get much more into this pre-zygote, before fertilization, during fertilization, after fertilization methods. At our level right now, we just need to know the one about timing, the one about behavior versus in general reproductive. So yes, just the general term is fine.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to play a game now and see if we've learned anything. We're going to play this one, which I believe is on reproductive isolation. Yep, on evolution of biodiversity. Oh, did I not log in? Oh, that's as if I'm you guys. Oh, maybe I'm not going to play. Maybe you guys are going to have to play quizzes. Nope, this is all set up for you guys as a student. So let's try this because I want to see when you guys finish this, you should be able to give me a screen that says your score. Oh, so you have to log in. So if you don't log in, yeah, because it won't show you your name. And I want to be able to see your name when you're playing it. So make sure you log in. If you're going to play these games, you have to earn 100%. You guys see that? Let's go ahead and try it, and we'll just play for a couple minutes. Got it. Right, let's get started. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We only have a couple minutes, but just so you can see, this one is a good one for you to practice before your test. Skip somebody. It's all of those. Although genetics is really changing how a lot of cladograms are organized. Yeah, and there's a whole field now about epigenetics, changes that happen during your lifetime that coat your DNA with methyl groups, which makes them change their expression of the trait, and how what your grandparents, your grandmother ate and what she exposed herself to affects her grandchildren. Something to make you think twice about your own nutrition. Right, last one for the winner. Benzo. All right, we are out of time. These are our grand winners. Right now. Josh, Emilio, Ryan, Tommy, and Vivian. Well done. And if you have any questions, I'll hang out for a little bit, but it is now time for us to go to advisory and hang out with Miss Abe. Bye, you guys. See you in a couple days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye, you too. Oh, thank you, Lorelai.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. This.